Hello, this is Lloyd Albritton, and thanks for stopping by again to visit with me here on my YouTube podcast channel. This one's entitled Lloyd's Commentaries and Stories. And I have a sister channel called Lloyd and Friends, Interesting Conversations with Interesting People. I hope you'll check that one out as well. This is where I interview people, and I have a number of interviews posted on that channel. And only on this one, comments about seven or eight that I've done. Now again, before we get started, let me ask you to go ahead and look down below there and share, like, and subscribe. Okay, that'll help me out a whole lot. Now today I have normally when I post these podcasts on the YouTube channel, I try to parallel that with the newspaper column that I do on Wednesday. Now this week a little bit has changed. Looking for material, I kind of perused back through some of my more advanced archive stories and posts. I wrote some columns for that more advanced going all the way back to the 1980s, and then in the early 2000s I was here and I wrote some columns, and so in any event, here I am back here doing it again. And so I went through the archives and I found a little story that I had written back then. It was the column was posted in the Advance that I thought was kind of relevant today. And so I kind of doctored it and tweaked it and edited it a little bit and submitted it, and it was rejected. The Advance editor, who I'm sure is extremely competent, has been doing this a long time, he felt that the topic matter was a little too, controversial, maybe? Uncomfortable is the word he used, and which is interesting enough because that was the very thing that the column was about people feeling uncomfortable, and how that we change, how that we are changing things in history that have already happened that we're uncomfortable with. And so in any event, I'm going to go ahead and post this here. Hopefully, if I do offend any of you, it's not intentional. I hope you'll understand that. I do think it's of importance, and so I'm going to go ahead and post it here. Now, I'm going to, instead of trying to ad-lib this, as I try to, so that it'll be authentic and natural, I'm going to go ahead and read it. Now, just so you know, I'm not this bad of a reader. But with my old eyes, I don't see as good as I used to, and sometimes when I try to read and look at the camera at the same time, my vision just won't focus on the word. And so if it looks as if I'm stumbling along a little bit from time to time, please forgive me. That's because I'm getting old, not because I'm stupid or can't read. But I want to read this to you because I want you to know precisely how I submitted this. Oh, and by the way, before I get into this, I might as well tell you, I sent it over to my brother Philip, who's my #1 counselor, and I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about this column as far as its controversial aspects of it? And Philip said, well, he liked it, but as far as controversial, he would rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, he would rate it a 10 plus. So, in any event, I think my editor is probably right, but we'll see how it goes. Now, this is not the first controversial thing that I've ever done. I need to tell you that. I've written a couple of books. I wrote a novel called Baby Blue some years ago, and when I came back here to Atmore back in 2008, I published that book along with another book, which was a collection of stories and poems that I had written through the years, and I'm happy with both of them. But the Baby Blue book, I don't know, I've sold hundreds, probably thousands of that book, over the last 10 or 15 years. and got a lot of compliments on it. A lot of people have loved that book. However, there were some things in it because the time period in it was from like early 1920s, maybe even 1913 or 14. It was kind of a saga taking you all the way up to 1951. And in the book, I tried to make my characters authentic. I think authentic characters are the strongest part of any story. And so in order to do that, you know, I had the characters speak in terms and use language that they used. Now the story itself had racial overtones. It was about a black man who killed a white man. It was a murder story and about how the sheriff solved it. Now to be sure, the black man was the hero of the story, and you know, it ended up that way. I never felt any part of it was racist at all. There are some curse words in it that I thought had to be used by these characters in order to be the characters I wanted them to be. And there was a certain scene in it, a rape scene that some people found objectionable. It's not all through the book, but I can tell you it's a compelling, powerful story. And I wrote it that way because I didn't think it could be that powerful without the way that I wrote it. I'm happy with the way I wrote it. But in any event, when I published the book, I did book signings all over the place, and you know, the mayor at that time, has been a friend of mine through the years, Jim Staff. You know, Jim told me, I bumped into him and he said, "Lloyd, I heard about this book and everything, Talk of the Town, and I'd like to read that." I said, "Okay, Jim, I'll give you a copy of it." So I gave him a copy, and he read it, or said he did, and said he liked it. And so he suggested, boy, the library would like to have a copy of that. So I went over and I took the library a copy. Well, a little while later, Jim called me, the mayor, and he said, "Lloyd, that book, you know, it's in big demand over there, and you know, we only have the one available. Is there any chance we could get a second one from you?" I said, "Well, sure." So I donated 2 more books. And I said, "Well, okay, Jim, well, would you just give me like a picture of you shaking my hand and donating the book, and that'll give me a little publicity, you know?" He said, "Sure." So there's a picture floating around somewhere where I'm presenting the books to the mayor. And so that's what we did. And while I was down at the library, I said, well, maybe I could have a book signing here at the library. And they said, "Sure." Well, about a week or a few days later, the mayor called me and asked me to stop by his office, which I did. And he said, "Lloyd, we're not going to be able to have that book signing for you." I said, "Well, really? Why not?" He said, "Well, there's some people in town that thinks it's racist." I said, "Well, Jim, you read the book. Did you think it was racist?" And he said, No, I didn't think so, but you know, we can't afford to have any political turmoil in the city, and also we just can't have that." Okay then. A little bit later, you know, several weeks later, I go to the newspaper over here. My old friend Sherry Digman, we've been friends for many years. She has a wonderful magazine that comes out monthly, 4-color. You know, everybody in town reads it. So I went over to see if I could purchase an ad in the magazine. And Sherry said, "Well, Lloyd, I hear you use some ugly language in that book." I said, "Well, no, actually, I didn't use any ugly language in it. I have a couple of characters that did." She said, "Well, anyway, that's what I heard, and I'm against that. I don't go with any of that ugly talk. And so I'm afraid we can't sell you an ad." I said, "Sherry, you're a newspaper. You sell ads." I said, "The book is not full of profanity like you're making it sound. It has a few ugly words, which almost every TV show on TV has a lot worse than what was in there." Anyway, the newspaper declined to sell me an ad on my book. And now here I am back again, writing for the newspaper, and we run into this little problem. You know, my buddy over there, the editor, you know, says he would be uncomfortable printing this. So we're going to do it. We're going to do it here on the YouTube channel, and you know, you can think what you do. I just want what you think. I just want you to know the intention is not to offend anybody, but I'm just going to give it to you like it is. Now, again, I'm going to read it, okay? So stay with me. I'm going to read it the best I can. The editorial today is entitled Huckleberry Finn in the 11th grade. That's a question. Huckleberry Finn in the 11th grade. Give me a break. And it goes a little something like this here. I've been perusing some of my old columns in the Atmore Advance archives, and I came across this one from February the 5th, 2003, which sort of struck a chord. In that 20-year-old article, I discussed a current news event, then 2003, a current news event which took place at Ransom Middle School in Pensacola. A mother complained that Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn made her 7th grader feel uncomfortable because it contained the N-word, which I don't know how many of you have read Huckleberry Finn, but yes, it did contain the N-word in reference to a slave character in the story. It was during the days of slavery. The teacher had been assigning her class this American classic for many years without complaint. And even though it was not the entire class or the entire neighborhood who was complaining about it, it was just one child, one mother, who was complaining, still the school principal stated that he was not willing for even one child to be made to feel uncomfortable, and that he was banning the use of the Huckleberry Finn book in the classroom. When the story surfaced, school board officials agreed that 7th grade students are too young to understand what Mark Twain was trying to say in his famous novel. And they banned the use of Huckleberry Finn as a class reading assignment until the 11th grade. Well, I waited for John Stossel, a news journalist that used to have a TV program called Gimme A Break, where he would talk about ridiculous things. I waited for Stossel to come out to discover this and come out on his Gimme A Break television program, but he never did. So allow me to retort for Stossel, give me a break. All right. Now, I'm certain that it was no later than the 3rd or 4th grade that I first read about the adventures of Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Probably earlier than that. And I enjoyed them immensely. Always been a couple of my favorite books. I even went down to the creek and tried to build a raft and float down Brushy Creek on it, just like Huck and Jim did, just like they floated down the Mississippi River. I searched for caves in the woods and hoping to find a cave with a hidden treasure and a drunk Indian in it, you know, like Tom and Becky did in the book. Well, my raft fell apart before I could float to the opposite side of the creek, and I did find plenty of drunk white men laying in the woods out in Nokomis where I lived. Used to be a lot of drunks out there. Found a lot of drunk white men, but I never did find a cave with a drunk Indian in it. Still, few stories ever excited my imagination like Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and its sister book, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. These stories appeal to the imaginations of children who are young enough to be interested in caves and rafts and dead rats tied to the end of a string. You know, some of the stories in the book, that sort of thing. 11th graders, you know, I just think that an 11th grader is probably a little too old to be interested in reading about Huckleberry Finn. The time has already passed. 11th graders are interested in girls and sports. They're not interested in Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. So to make it unavailable until the 11th grade is, well, anyway, you know, give me a break. Okay. Now, the question, did I understand in the 4th grade what Mark Twain was trying to say? No, I didn't. And further, I still don't understand what Mark Twain was trying to say, because I don't think he was trying to say anything at all. I think he was simply trying to tell us an entertaining story about some small town children adventures during a certain time in history when the N-word was used. This was set back in the 1800s, early 1800s, during slavery times. During the course of history, cultural changes, attitudes change. Cultures change, Cultures change, attitudes change, social mores change, things change. I remember discussing the 14th century author Geoffrey Chaucer in high school literature class one time, and snickering along with the rest of my buddies at a certain section that talked about a woman farting. You know, we ought to be through giggling about fart jokes, you know, by the time we're about 12. But, you know, I was 15 or 16 years old and still giggling at that stuff. Now, some of the ladies in the class they felt a little uncomfortable about that. Most of the boys thought it was just funny. But our wise teacher, some of you may remember Miss Jean Webb, taught me literature in high school. She quickly shushed us up and told us to grow up and understand that sometimes these things were used. This was the 14th century, like just 1300s, the 1300s that Chaucer wrote this. And you know, you gotta take the language in perspective of the time. All right, let's see if I can find my place here. Okay. History is replete with events, topics, and words which are uncomfortable to read about. Certainly no words in the English language could be more uncomfortable or objectionable than the words war and death. But how can you discuss history without discussing war and death? Should we be changing those words to the W word or the D word? What about the drunk Indian who tried to kill Tom and Becky in the cave in Mark Twain's story? Should we be calling him the I word? We live with a lot of Porch Creek Indians. It's actually in their name, Porch Creek Indians. And we use the name liberally around here a lot. It would feel kind of stupid to be referred to them as the I word. And what about all the J's? You know, the Jews that the Nazis murdered in World War II. You know, I say Nazis, maybe we should be talking about the N-word. You see how ridiculous it gets. So these are all things that we're uncomfortable with. I'm uncomfortable with them. Yet these are things that happened. And I'd prefer to learn about my history in unfettered terms. Bigots toward any race of people is a very bad thing when it occurs in our present time, and our practice of it in the past is a great big smudge on our historical good name. America has made a lot of progress in the advancement of racial tolerance, I think, and so has most of the world. But must we, in our new age of enlightenment, must it include historical ignorance? A recent study revealed that most graduating college students these days are less knowledgeable about history than junior high school students were 50 to 70 years ago. Is this because we've become so sensitive and uncomfortable with the real facts of human history that we can't even teach history anymore? If Mark Twain's stories of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer were edited to refer to, all right, here we go, to Nigger Jim, that's what they called him in the story, Old Nigger Jim. Should they have said African American Jim? Would that have changed the essence of the story? Well, maybe not. Maybe it would have still been a good story. What if we changed George Washington's horse from a gray mare to a black stallion? Would that affect anything? Maybe not. These are little things in history. Do we have the prerogative of going back and changing the little things? And when we start changing the little things, How long is it going to take us before we start changing the big things? We're already tearing down statues and changing history right here in our own generation right now. Through the centuries, through the centuries of world history, entire civilizations have risen and fallen. The Roman Empire, the Assyrians, the Babylonians. It has not been uncommon for nations to conquer other nations and immediately commence to destroy the defeated nation's entire history and culture, making it extremely difficult for historians and archaeologists to reconstruct and tell us stories of the past. 20th century writer and philosopher George Santayana is quoted as saying, "Those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it." Archaeologists often dig in hard rocks for years just to discover what kind of cooking pan an earlier civilization used. Is that important? Well, I don't know. They think it is. Are all the little facts and artifacts and expressions of the past important to a complete understanding of history? I think they are. Can't we be sensitive, kind, and compassionate toward our neighbors today, the way we're living today? Can't we do that today without changing our history? However uncomfortable it makes us feel. Come on, give me a break.